Welcome to a new Team CGC 9.8 video. Today I have 5 9.8 comics that are rising in value. So the first one is an Amazing Spider-Man number 337 in a 9.8. Yeah, I saw this one recently sell on an auction and I thought it went for like a really stiff price. It just kind of surprised me. So this one's definitely rising in value over the short term. And kind of makes sense. Like you got a classic kind of Sinister Six cover on this one. And that most recent Spider-Man movie, there were like a lot of villains in that one. So you were getting quite a bit of kind of Sinister Six vibes out of that movie. So it kind of makes sense that this one's pretty hot right now. We'll get into prices in a moment, but there's a 93 9.8s in a blue label. 39.1% is the 9.8 ratio. So that recent price in a 9.8 sold for $297. So, right around $300 for this one. Not really a key issue. I just feel like this one's, heating up right now. If you go back a few months, though, I saw a few of these in a 9.8 sell for $184 and $224.99. So, I think if you're a big Sinister Six fan, under 200, like that 184 price, I think is making sense. So, I think for this one, you want to wait kind of 6 to 12 months, wait for it to cool down a little bit. Hopefully, you can get it under 200. And again, yeah, as a Sinister Six fan, that's kind of a pretty cool collector item, under $200. But right now at $300, I find it hard to see how this one's kind of going to hold its value right now, given that it has kind of heated up in the short term. Okay, next one is a really cool one that I'm definitely keeping my eye on right now. A new Avengers number 7 with the first appearance of the Illuminati. So if you've saw the recent Doctor Strange movie trailer, you kind of hear Professor X's voice in that trailer. And basically Professor X is like the leader of the Illuminati. The Illuminati is like a secret society of superheroes. So I think that's a really cool idea, certainly. And I can imagine, quite a few MCU movies from, in the next 5 or 10 years or so, having the Illuminati in the movies where, occasionally they'll meet up in the movies to kind of solve problems and stuff like that. So I think the Illuminati is, it's a really hot comic book right now, but there's possible some long-term potential, let's call it there. So in a 9.8 on the census for a new Avengers number 7, 436 9.8s in a blue label, 57.6% is the 9.8 ratio. And this one's definitely rising in value. It was pretty much like a zero to hero kind of comic almost. Recent sales on the lower end, one had sold for $305. Saw another one sell for $430 and another one for $495. That $305 one was just like a week or so ago in kind of a stealthy auction. So, this one's absolutely heating up. There's a bit of a downside to this book. There's no real kind of first appearance or anything. Like, yes, it's first appearance of Illuminati, but those are all heroes that already existed. They kind of come together to form the Illuminati. So that's a bit of a downside. I do kind of see this one cooling down maybe a little bit after the Doctor Strange movie. But given the potential, I would say that's going to be the perfect time to kind of get in there. So, you know what? If you wanted to purchase this one now while it's kind of hot, maybe aim closer to that $305 level. But I think sort of 6 to 12 months after this Doctor Strange movie, this one will cool down. Hopefully you can get it just a little under $300. I do think it's kind of a great modern 9.8 with a really cool first appearance that I kind of want. But not really my style to kind of get in there when this one's really hot. And I don't think it's worth like $495, but right closer to $300, a little bit under $300 when this one cools down. I think a new Avengers number 7 is just absolutely one to keep an eye on in the 9.8 moving forward. Next one is definitely a hot one as well. 0.1 number 1 from 2012. First appearance of Sam Alexander, the new Nova, with sort of the MCU confirmations that, yes, there is going to be a Nova movie at some point. This one has heated up, and certainly Nova number 1 has heated up as well. I'm pretty sure they're going to go with Richard Rider Nova, though. Sam Alexander Nova, probably a little bit more speculative than a Nova number 1. But on the census for a 0.1 number 1 from 2012, 313 9.8s in a blue label, 43.5% is the 9.8 ratio. So some recent sales on this one, definitely heating up. $389.99, $399.75. And if you go back like 2 weeks on this one before that announcement, there were a few sales like in that sort of $250 range. So this one kind of from $250 to $400 rising in value in the short term here. Do you want to get in there now? I do think this one will probably cool down quite a bit as well. Similar to what I said on the last video about Nova number 1. You know, a lot of times you just don't want to get right in there right after the announcement because there's going to be a little bit of hype and demand being generated and the prices will, you know, be a little bit elevated. I think you're a little bit more patient on this one. That Nova movie's not coming for like years, I would imagine. So there's going to be a better time to grab a Nova number one. It is a point one number one, sorry, from 2012. It is a pretty great one with that first appearance of the new Nova. You know, it's around $400. Maybe it just cools down to kind of a little closer to $300. And then I think it kind of makes sense there on a point one number one in a 9.8 from 2012. Next one is a Miles Morales Spider-Man number 13. This is the first appearance of Billy Morales. This one's definitely picking up in value over the short term. Certainly noticing some stiffer prices in the 9.8 recently. There's a 203 9.8s in a blue label. 84.9% is a 9.8 ratio. This one's, you know, pretty much like almost a new comic book, just coming out in the last few years here. So recent sales for this one, $240. And I saw one recently sell as well for $199. So I think, you know, this one might have heated up just a little bit off of the Across the Spider-Verse kind of trailers and things like that. The most recent sale was that $199. So I think, you know, $240, that's going to be a little bit too hot of a price, I would say. If you want this one now, certainly around $200, maybe just a little bit under. But this was one, you know, you could have bought it for under $100, certainly when it kind of first came out. But even just sort of a month or two ago, before these Across the Spider-Verse trailers, I think this one was pretty much like $125 to $150. So it's rising in value, a bit speculative, but any kind of Miles Morales, you know, maybe Billy Morales really has a huge, bright future. You never know. So this one could absolutely be worth it. I would say under $200 is the price to aim for here. $240, just a little bit too expensive for, you know, admittedly a pretty speculative book, but still a Miles Morales key to consider. I would target under $200 on that one in a 9.8. Okay, and the last one's a really great one to think about for sure. It's a Sentry number one. First appearance of Sentry on this one. There just seems to be a lot of Sentry like crossing over into, you know, some pretty popular storylines. So maybe they eventually bring Sentry into the MCU. I think that would be pretty cool. This Sentry number one, though, is a pretty great collector item as well. It came out in like the year 2000, so comic books weren't that popular during that time. I think the printing's a little bit less on this one, certainly compared to like a book from like the early 90s or the 80s. So Sentry number one in that first printing, kind of with the tough black cover as well. 370 9.8s in a blue label. 40% is the 9.8 ratio. I'm surprised that 9.8 ratio is not maybe a little bit lower. I think it'll tick lower over time with this being like, you know, pretty tough black cover, I think. So a Sentry number one in a 9.8 selling for, in an auction, I think this is a pretty decent price right now, $462.97. I think you know, in the past 2-3 months, you see this one going over $500. But it's absolutely rising in value when you just sort of look in this sort of short to medium term. I remember this one being kind of right around 300, maybe a little bit over 300, was a pretty solid first appearance, you know, back then around 300 to kind of speculate on. But, you know, this one definitely heating up with that recent sale around $462.97. This one still might be worth it. A little bit hot, but, you know, I think right around $450, let's call it, in the 9.8. Certainly if you're a big Sentry fan, and I think there's probably some MCU potential with that one moving forward as well. On a Sentry number one in a 9.8. All right, team. Yeah, just 5 9.8 comics I noticed that are rising in value. And yeah, some of them, you know, kind of tough on these ones that are hot because obviously most of them are really cool and you kind of want them, but a lot of times if you're a little bit patient on some of these ones that are hot, you'll end up getting a better price. And I think that's the case for most of these. But yeah, some pretty great 9.8s, I think, to consider. Some good ideas for the team. All right, thanks so much for watching, though. I'll see you on the next one. If you're liking my videos, please subscribe and hit that bell, and I'll keep you updated on future content.